Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome officially to the channel. This is a continuation of the series where I go into odd game accessories or peripherals that developers made to get us more into the game, mentally or physically. Well, okay, most of the time. Sometimes they just wanted to see what they could do with a game. I mean, at times it's just fun to break a game, almost more fun than it is to play one. Ask anyone who's played games like Skyrim or any other physics-like games. What, did you think only gamers like messing with game engines and games themselves? Just to see how they break? Did you? Seriously? No. Let's take a look at a group who may or may not have made the Game Genie as much out of random inspiration as out of spite. The Game Genie was the product of Codemasters, a developer of no small note in Europe, responsible for any number of series from the Dizzy series to Overlord, all the way up to Dirt 5. And while like many developers who got started in the mid-80s, they were a little bit more focused on the PC market at the time. As well, it was a far more stable platform on top of having been the platform of choice in the UK where they were from. And it was also one of the platforms that didn't suffer from what we in America call the crash, which is an event that killed off most of the game consoles in the early 80s in the United States. Now, it wouldn't take them long after having seen the NES in action at the Vega Computer Entertainment Show to one in on some of this action. So they went so far as to talk to Nintendo at CES about doing games on their platform and, well, frankly got the cold shoulder, in part because they didn't have an appointment. This was a problem because to do games legally on Nintendo's console, you needed a license. Otherwise, your games would be considered counterfeit. You see, Nintendo Entertainment System had a hardware solution for recognizing licensed games. It basically boiled down to them manufacturing most of the PCBs themselves, with only a few rare exceptions: Konami, Namco, and Sunsoft, just to name a few. Without it, you would have to reverse engineer a way around the lockout chip in order to get your games to work on the console. Now, this wasn't a very uncommon practice, but it was a deterrent, and one of the earliest times this kind of thing had actually been implemented on a console, and was in large part a direct result of the lack of quality control on earlier consoles, and was seen as the main reason for the downfall of the industry to begin with, that they even had this on the console to begin with, along with the, Nintendo seal of approval. This slight by Nintendo would prove to be a catalyst for the company, ultimately causing them to start looking into ways to get around this lockout chip so that they could put their games on the console. It was while they were actually learning this hardware and basically reverse engineering it by, connecting it to a PC that was then connected to a Commodore 64 that then went through a mass of wires and electronics, only to go into a production NES. If you're lost on that, so am I. Welcome to, Rev 1 of hardware hacking, boys and girls. It's confusing. Make no mistake, this is exactly what they were doing. They were hacking into the NES hardware to try to get their games set up on that hardware. It was during the revision of the game development in which they were using a much more refined version of this particular setup that they struck on the idea of trying to make one of their games as appealing as possible to audiences. By that, they wanted to have tons of options so that you could customize the experience, and then thought, hey, what if you could do this to every game? I mean, it wouldn't be possible, right? The games are stored on a ROM, which is read-only, and you can't directly change the code on something like that. Or so they thought at first. They would eventually come up with a concept of the Game Genie. What this was a device that you plug into your existing game cart, and then plug that into your console. This would act as a buffer between you and your NES, allowing you to come up into the Game Genie menu that would allow you to enter in codes that would affect the state of the game as it went through the Game Genie and into your NES. Now, obviously Nintendo wasn't too happy with the Game Genie, so they tried to push it out of the market, claiming a violation of copyright law in the Galoob vs. Nintendo trial. They stated that it created a derivative work. This actually stopped the sales in the United States, but not in Canada. And after it was found out in the Canadian court system that it didn't violate anything, the product continued to thrive, having devices come out on Game Boy, Game Gear, Genesis, and Super Nintendo, to name a few. It really was the increase in CD technology that made this a harder device to use. Basically, since the concept required an intermediary device to alter the data being sent to the hardware. And realistically on the CD, you couldn't put anything between the CD and the unit without making another CD drive and then trying to interpret it that way. So it just sort of died off on its own. However, what do you guys think of the Game Genie? Did any of you ever own one, and for what system? Do you think they were just straight up cheating, or was it all in good fun? Let me know in the comments. And while you're there, please hit that like button. And if you haven't, consider subscribing. That helps me out a ton on the channel. Till next time though, have a great rest of your day, and happy gaming!